Welcome to Could Be Pretty Cool News, the podcast where we dive into the exciting world of creative entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Casey, and together we'll embark on a journey to explore this dynamic ecosystem from multiple angles, including academia, research and data, community building, and compelling personal narratives from creative entrepreneurs themselves. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we uncover the stories and strategies behind building successful creative ventures. It's time to discover why the world of creative entrepreneurship could be pretty cool. Today, we're speaking with Vanessa Coulor, a Brooklyn-based creative who has managed to turn what many would see as a career setback into opportunities for reinvention. From her early days in venture at Silicon Valley Bank to launching her own creative consultancy in between dreams, Vanessa's story shows us how sometimes the most meaningful ventures emerge not from careful planning, but from giving ourselves permission to dream and reimagine what work can look like. So I am so happy to have you on Could Be Pretty Cool News today. And starting off, I'd love if you could just introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Casey. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Coulor. I'm a multifaceted creative based in Brooklyn, but working everywhere. And I work on the intersects of community design and innovation.
Amazing. So, of course, we're going to dive into what all of that means as far as your day to day. But just to kind of give some framework for how you ended up where you are right now, how did you start on this path that you're currently on?
So a lot of it was luck, fate, serendipity, and God just putting me in different directions and paths. So I started my career in venture debt and banking at Silicon Valley Bank. And so there I was really helping founders, startups, VCs think through how they can grow and scale to their next milestones. So it was very helpful looking at that perspective. I specifically focused on working with underrepresented founders, just looking at the different challenges that they were navigating and facing, and built a team out that was focused just on resources for that journey for underrepresented founders and investors. How can we as a community really use the community and resources we have within each other and to form a kinship that's going to help everyone reach their goals and milestones? So I'm sure people are familiar with SVB in the collapse. Yes, it was very wild, but I also say such an important moment because it really caused me to pause. We were isolated. And so we were seeing stuff on Twitter. The Fed came in, they said pencils down, you're not allowed to talk to anyone. And so that was a real perspective shift for me. I was like, oh, okay, the whole bank just collapsed. What does this mean now? Luckily, the bank was acquired by another bank now called First Citizens, and SVB is still functioning and operating, doing a ton of amazing things for the community. I was like, I need a break from corporate after all of that. And I went to go join a Y Combinator startup that was spun out of SVB called Vouch. And so Vouch was focused on insurance for other startups. And so we were building along, kind of wanted to stay within that community. I really love working with founders, innovators, creative thinking, and forward thinking people. So was doing that and building community for them on the insurance side. So typical startup life, about 5 months into it, I got laid off from my job. So that's where I said a little push. And interesting day for my life. I got laid off from the job, and then an hour later ended a relationship that I was in for 5 years. So it was a very dramatic day for me in life. And I just paused and I'm like, all right, this is a really interesting point where I have nothing to do. I'm at a point, it was December of last year. I was like, I don't really have anyone to report to. And this was a new perspective for me. So I was enjoying that time. And then I decided to go to Tanzania. And so I have some friends who are based in Tanzania and I've been there before. And I'm like, I need a change of pace, change of environment. And so while I was out there, I spent just a lot of time going into like a restorative mode and just honestly living life. And I had wanted to do the startup a long time ago that was about fabric textiles. So peel and stick wallpaper, but a fabric version based off African prints. So while I was in Tanzania, I was exploring that and mentoring some startups and learning what the tech eco innovation system looks like there, and then decided to go to Ghana. I was working with a startup called Pay Angel. And so Pay Angel and I met in, and shows you the through line of community, met when I was a mentor for Techstars through SVB. I continued on as a mentor for Techstars, and I was just having a conversation with their founder, and he's like, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I'm like, "Relaxing on the beach and reading books." And he's like, "Well, come see. We have some room on the team to come collaborate, work on a few projects, see if anything is exciting to you." And that's how I started my relationship with Pay Angel. So getting to work with Pay Angel, I was doing more stuff out in market. I ended up running into my team at SVB at an investor event I was doing for Pay Angel. And they're like, "Hey, why don't you come back and consult? Come back and think about what else can you do for the ecosystem and community." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. I'm actually doing this for one community already. Let me see how I can work with them." And so working with the Catalyst 2045 team that focuses on supporting Black, Latinx, and underrepresented founders. So now at this point, I'm like, okay, I like accidentally, serendipitously found my way into two consulting opportunities. Let me formalize things. And that's when I started In Between Dreams, my consulting arm. So In Between Dreams, we are a creative collective in studio, and so focused on innovation, design, and community. So anything like bringing community together, bringing in-person activations, consulting on what that may look like, regardless of sector, on how to build that and how to grow that from a strategic standpoint. And the design arm of that is our product called Henfie. And so Henfie comes from the Twi word in Ghana, meaning kingdom. And so it's a third space in virtual kingdom of how to use art as a tool, as an appreciation to think about things differently and change your perspective. And so that's the design arm of In Between Dreams. That's a separate product. And then as a collective, In Between Dreams is a consulting arm made up of a really, really cool community and creative class of people that we keep adding to and growing to work on different projects. There are so many different things I'm interested in. It's the creative side, it's the fintech side, it's the community side. Let me just figure out all the projects that I want to work on and have that be kind of the nexus of my work. Very long intro to say that's how I have the founder hat, that's how I have the community hat, but all at the nexus of like these things connect to all those three areas of community, design, and innovation where I'm really passionate.
So love that. So my follow-up question is, you mentioned so many things about the tech ecosystem, venture backable companies and investors, that for a lot of people in the creative space, it isn't necessarily applicable. For most creative businesses are not venture backable. And yet there is still so much crossover and cross pollination between creatives who are using tech to build their brands, build their businesses, folks in tech who want creative something to help with their tech company. And so for you, how does that sort of cross pollination with all the things that you do play out in your life?
I think it's the lessons that I've learned from each. One thing I love about the VC ecosystem and innovation in tech is they really get people comfortable with dreaming big. What does the $100 million version of this look like? What does the exit look like? And I think that's a really, really important skill that people on that side get very, very comfortable with. Being on the creative side, I'm like, well, it's hard to do that when you don't have the funding, but really what could that version look like, and then moving backwards from that. And so the lessons that I think each of the VC and the tech side have are also applicable to the creative community and vice versa. I think it's so funny. We have ChatGPT, we have all these stuff until I really started getting into a creative workspace and flow. I'm like, I'm not using all my resources, and it's not all the tech, not I have all this whole suite of stack that I could use, but did I go outside for a walk today? I'm looking for a color for a logo, like what already exists in nature. What did the creative kinship with everything around me look like? I'm listening to Fela, I'm listening to old school music. What is the pace? What's the tone? What is the heartbeat of life that they had for that time? How is that applicable to my work? One of my friends is going to laugh at me, but I really got into bird watching this year. And I'm not like someone would be like, oh, I never thought that you would be about that life. But I have this tree by my window and birds were coming to visit me all the time. Let me see what they're about. Let me start looking them up. And I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. This one traveled from here. This one traveled from South America. And just even seeing like their patterns of, okay, this is when they're in a season of movement. This is when they're in a season of stillness. How can I apply that to my work for the week? I think it allows me to really go and shift into different perspectives, and being on the creative side taught me that so much. And I also tell the tech people, how can you apply that to your lens? And I think there's so much we can learn from each other, especially people in different fields. I like watching weird stuff on Masterclass all the time. I'm like, oh, people who do mining, like, what's that about? Like, how do they go about their job? Like, how are they thinking about things? And what little pieces can I add to my recipe book about how I'm approaching my work and looking and thinking about things differently?
Wow, such a great answer. And so, to talk more about the dreaming big and the vision for you as founder, what are some of the things that you're hoping to do with In Between Dreams? Do you already have your little 5-year projection, 10-year projection? Are you just enjoying the ride right now? What does In Between Dreams look like to you in the future?
I think in the future, In Between Dreams looks like the venture that I worked on and developed and crafted in my life that keeps me rooted. Going back into a place of how I got to this space was I was really stressed out and burned out, and then I just happened to be laid off. But finding the time to really be at rest, I signed my cards with ease and leisure. Like I'm in a place where I want to work, I want to create, I want to produce things, I want to do things for the community with ease and leisure. And so I think just allowing it to be flexible, allowing it to grow into something else, take a different course, end up being and evolving into something else, but that's going to keep me rooted in just happiness, peace, connected to my community, the things that I really consider to be my core values. And I want to expand that as a collective for other people. I want it to be a way that people think about and approach work differently, but really producing amazing things, working on really amazing projects, and saying, oh, I didn't know we could approach work that way and still get that result that we did when working with In Between Dreams.
Oh my goodness, you're an amazing storyteller. And is there anything that I didn't ask you that you're like, oh, but I do want to say like this thing, or I have this final thought?
I feel like if there's any closing thing that I would add is really encouraging people to reimagine what work looks like for you, what relationships look like for you. I think that's been the hardest part of this journey of thinking work has to look like this. I had to really re-examine what is my relationship with the work, even to the point where it's like, now I'm working on my own stuff. I'm building my own company. Why does it still feel strenuous and like a task? I was applying a lot of the corporate principles and lens to what output looked like. So I'm like, oh, it's not an Excel today. It's not reaching out to 10 investors today, but going outside, that's work. Going and taking care of myself, that's work. I may see something, I may be inspired by something that I wasn't expecting that may spark a thought or inspire something else. And so I think knowing that we could reimagine every experience we have in our life, and even with the employees. Like I told my little cousins, you guys are on TikTok. Like I'm going to explain to the family what I'm working on. If you guys see any ideas that relate to this, send it to me. Be part of this community. Like you could be part of this experience with me. And so that would just be the last thing I would say to people is like reimagine what experiences for everything could look like for you. I think we are able to create and develop and architect the world that we want to live in, but also your own world. Like what do you want your day-to-day to look like? Like I'm having an amazing time sitting here just having a conversation with Casey. That's work for me. And this is something I would do in my free time anyway. Like, hey, let's FaceTime, let's talk about these things. And so just wanting people to know that they have the capability and the authority to reimagine what their life looks like.
From selling exactly one t-shirt at an Iowa sneaker convention to manufacturing merch for major recording artists in Los Angeles, our next guest, Miller McCoy, knows what it means to dream beyond your zip code. Through chronic illness, a shattered leg, and a pandemic lockdown, he built Limitless Manufacturing Group by doing exactly what its name suggests, refusing to accept limitations.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Miller McCoy. I'm the owner of a company called Limitless Manufacturing Group, as well as a few personal lines, one called Human Clothing and another called Made by Miller. I do a whole lot of different creative business ventures where I work with lots of different creatives and help develop their brands out for them, as well as I run my own brands myself. So I like to dibble and dabble in both lanes, I suppose. The business aspect of helping other people bring their ideas to life, and then also seeing my own ideas come to life. I'm originally from Des Moines, Iowa, kind of middle of nowhere, a flyover state, nobody stops by, nothing creative really going on there, right? You either go into agriculture, you go into insurance, or possibly construction, right? And that's the lane in Iowa, or at least where I'm from. And growing up, I had chronic pain and chronic nausea. So I couldn't always participate the same way that most of the other people and my peers and everything like that were, right? I was trying to go to school, but I'd miss 50 days, 60 days, 100 days, whatever it is, right? I miss a lot of school. I'm in and out of the doctors a lot. I can't do the traditional sport route. All of those things due to unforeseen circumstances that were a little bit out of my control. And so around the age of 9, I actually began getting introduced and entertained with magic, like card tricks and coin tricks and stuff like that, right? And by the age of 12, magic is one of those things. If you're laying down in bed sick or right hanging around the house or whatever, as long as you got a deck of cards and you got YouTube or a book that teaches you magic tricks, right? I was starting to do all of those little things. And I found a deep love for it. But when I got to mid-teens or around that 14, 15, 16 range, my health issues were far blown out, where unfortunately I just couldn't continue down that path. I was not reliable at that point, right? If you book me for a show, there's a possibility I can't make that show because I'm sick, right? And I'm ill. So actually around that point in time is kind of when I started making a transition into graphic design. See, through magic, I had to teach myself how to make my logo, how to make my business cards. At 12 years old, I learned HTML so I could build my first website, right? Like through the power of YouTube, right? And as a kid, not really going to school, but obsessed with learning and growing. I'm sitting on YouTube all day, just learning things that I need to learn that pertain to my life. So I taught myself a bit on Photoshop, and I was making some just cool designs, cool logos that were speaking to me, right? And I wanted to figure out how to make these designs real. And because I'm showing my friends, but I'm turning a computer around. I'm showing my family. I'm like, hey, look at this that I just made. Oh, that's cool. You're doing it on a computer though. Like it's not really like a tangible, real thing. So I started thinking, okay, how can I make this into a real thing? And I did my first little run of t-shirts with a little, like a yin yang logo and said human on the front sort of deal. And that's what kind of got my foot into the door of making tangible product. I did a first little run of t-shirts around the age of 14, maybe it was 15. And I went to a sneaker convention. We were having a sneaker convention in a nearby town, and I set up a booth and I was selling my t-shirts. Well, I was hoping to sell my t-shirts. I sold one of them, and it was to a friend of mine named Alan at the time. And that was it. So I felt a little discouraged, but I was like, there's something here. I'm enjoying this. After the event, I still went home and I sat back down on Photoshop and started making more designs, right? So I just couldn't, it's like I had a bug, right? It stuck with me. I couldn't get rid of it. So I continued just through social media and through local groups, just word of mouth. These are my t-shirts. This is my brand. And where I'm from, there was nobody else really doing anything like that. Some people thought it was really unique. Some people were like, okay, bud, how's the little design clothing thing going, right? And I just really, I stuck with it. I started doing what's called product seeding. Basically, a simpler term is I would make a care package and I would get a sort of celebrity or an influencer or their manager or their team to say, hey, send us that, right? I'd get their address, I'd put a bunch of t-shirts or hoodies in a box, and I'd ship it over to them. I guess I didn't really view it as product seeding. I didn't really know what I was viewing it as at the time. All I knew was in Iowa, not many people are supporting me. And through just like obviously a marketing and keen, just like a business and marketing, I know if I can get somebody that all my peers listen to this artist or listen to this or watch this person's videos, if I can get them to show me some level of support or love, then that means through transitive properties, they should be showing me some sort of love or right. And so I didn't necessarily know what I was doing at the time, but it was marketing, I guess. It was, let me just get a celebrity to wear my t-shirt. Some of the first big names that I had were like Trippie Redd or NLE Choppa. Like, so Trippie's from the Ohio area, which is, we've got a lot of fall off into the Iowa area for that whole world. And so that was really big for me at the time. People in Iowa thought it was cool, right? Everybody's like, oh, all right, this guy's on to something now, right? And so I started to then take it and do these little pop-up shops where I would try to sell to as many local people as I could get. So I'd rent out a little spot in a mall or a strip mall, even wherever I could, really. And I would just host a weekend-long pop-up, right? Or there was the last one I did was just one day, quick strike, right? It's only open from like noon to 8 p.m. or something like that, right? And I actually remember that last one really well. We had a big old line going out of the store, like going down the strip mall a little bit. And actually after that pop-up, that's when I realized, oh, I kind of actually have some funds here. If I put myself in the same location and area that I'm already sending out my products to, I can do it in person and actually build a relationship with these people, right? And so at that point, I was trying to figure out a way that I could move either out to Los Angeles or New York. Los Angeles was always first on the docket list. From Iowa, I'm already in the cold and used to the cold during the winters. I didn't want to experience that much more. And with my health and stuff like that, the cold and depressing season, that just, makes things a little bit worse. So I was like, okay, let's go out to sunny Southern California, right? I moved out to Los Angeles when I was 20 years old. So, but that whole entire time, whether I realized it or not, I'm doing the building blocks and setting the things in place to be able to get me to be able to move out of a place like Iowa. Most people don't move out of Iowa once you're born there, right? It's a pretty stagnant place. It's comfortable. It's easy. I had just turned 20, ran the final pop-up, and I had saved up enough money to be able to make the trip out here. However, right as I was figuring everything out, I got into an accident where I broke from my knee down to my ankle. I had a spiral fracture in like 120 different places. So I was in the hospital there were some complications. It took about a month. And while I was in the hospital, I had received a message from some local Iowans that were photographers that moved out to Los Angeles probably about 6 months prior. And they had an old roommate who was moving out of the country, and they had this open room. And they were like, hey, it's not going to last long. We're currently subleasing this place from a guy who lives in Egypt right now. He's owned this place for like 20 years. It's under market value. If we put this thing online, it's going to get snatched up in a day. We know you want to move out here. Do you want to do it? And so I messaged them. I said, yes, I'm super interested, but I'm in the hospital and I don't know when I'm going to get out. I've got a broken leg. And they're like, okay, well, we can't hold it because we have rent to pay. What do you want to do? Laying in the hospital bed, I typed their Venmo in, typed in the rent amount, and sent my deposit, sent my first month's rent. And I said, I'm going to make it out there. I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm coming. Take my money. Don't give that room up. So I did that for about 3 months until I couldn't really bear and stand it anymore. It was wintertime in Iowa. My leg was broken. I felt like I wasn't making any progress on my brand. At that time, I was doing a lot of sewing and stuff too. With a broken leg, it was hard for me to sew. I was feeling beaten and discouraged and just down. And I was like, my brother was in town. And I looked at my brother and I said, hey, help me pack my car. We're going to drive to California. He kind of looked at me like a madman, like, look at you're in bed on crutches and a broken leg. What do you mean? It's like, I can drive. We can split the drive. Help me pack my bags. We're going to California. I got to get out. I got to go. Right. And so that night, packed my bags. The following morning, we woke up 4 or 5 a.m., jumped in the car and drove. We did a straight shot, 24 hours, Iowa to LA. I got out to LA and, he helps me unpack. I get settled in. I meet Jason and Nina, my roommates at the time. And basically about 4 days later, COVID lockdown happens. So, and now I remember specifically, I'm in the car, we're listening to the radio in the car, and they're talking about this, what could be this airborne illness that's coming into America, and, is what's going to happen, and our place is going to go on lockdown. Lo and behold, 4 days after I get to California, lockdown. Now I'm stuck in this predicament where it's, well, gosh, I came out here to be able to go to the fashion district and be able to meet all these brands and these connections and go into warehouses and manufacturing facilities and level up my game. But now all these things are getting shut down and are closed down and everything. So it was a troubling time there. It still had the broken legs. There was lots of moving parts to the move and to what led me to just really getting out here and cementing myself out here. So the lockdown happens. I'm still running my brand online. I'm starting to be able to, instead of doing product seeding now out here, I'm getting able to style these influencers and musicians that I was just sending the care packages to. Now I'm going to meet them in person and show them my pieces in person, get to describe them the way I want to and dress them how I want to dress them. And if you want the truth, I'm not the happiest with my own personal style, right? My mom is very stylish. She's extremely artistic. She's very stylish. As a kid, right, my mom would come to me and say, hey, Miller, does this look good? I've been on the more artsy side. I've always had an artsy eye and mind. And for my personal brand, right, and while living in Iowa for those 5 years, I'm having to run and gun my own photo shoots and video shoots every week, right? I'm having to just to try to make an effort to show people that I'm real about what I'm trying to do and what I am doing, right? I think in other cities and stuff like that, you can make a t-shirt and put it online and you can start telling people I'm a fashion designer, right? And sure, right, maybe you are, but there's no credibility. There's no one's going to take it serious, right? It took years of doing it back where I'm from, of doing it consistently on a weekly basis, right? I would text random people that were in my yearbook or on school or whatever. Hey, your face looks like it could be really well for this new t-shirt that I'm making. Can I invite you to come do a little photo shoot for me? Have you ever had any interest in modeling before? Right? And so I would do a lot of my own styling then, right? With my own pieces, but I would bring my own closet with me and I'd, give them the right pants and I'd put on the right shoe and give them the hat or the jewelry, the accessories, right? I'm very much internet and book learned, right? I didn't go to fashion school. I don't have proper training or teachings in these things. A lot of it was learned through the act of just doing. And if you look at some of my first stuff, it's probably horrendous, right? And I think just by repetitive getting the reps in, right? If you're your first time trying to style somebody, it's not going to go as great as your 1,000th try of trying to styling somebody, right? And so, and I think that's with lots of things in life. So I was doing the product styling or the product seeding and the styling and stuff like that a bunch. And pretty shortly after that, a bunch of the people that I was dressing and working with, they started saying, hey man, we know you're dressing us in like your own brand and your own clothes, but we really like them. But you think you could like take your name off and put my name on it? You think you can make my merchandise the way you make your clothes? Or you think you can make me a brand? And that's where a little light bulb went off in my head, right? This is where I realized, okay, this is where I can go from selling 50 or 100 units of this t-shirt to going and selling a few thousand of them. And so I put my first order together for a really big DJ for some hats. And I was doing some small little, people started realizing that I was actually doing something at a fairly high level. People would give me calls. I would start doing a little bit of consulting for some people that wanted to start brands, just on a very small level, not like real consultant work. And I'm realizing as I'm doing all this stuff, there's actually something here. There's real substance to this. And, I put together this first little order for some hats. And then shortly after that, I'm actually out at a little Hollywood party and we are making our way out. And I'm hooting and hollering about, hey, after party at my spot. Granted, we lived in East Hollywood off of Normandy Ave in a little teeny tiny townhouse that most people that were at that sort of party would not drive over there type of deal, right? It was just, there's two completely different worlds. And so I show up and there was a gate in front of the townhouses and there's like 6 people standing in front of the gate and they're like, oh, hey, we're here for the after party. I was like, oh, I thought I was just joking, but all right. I let them in. Lo and behold, one of them that actually ended up coming in was a fairly big manager in the music industry and managed lots of big names. And we had no idea who each other were, but he started just talking to me and I tell him I make clothes. He's asking to see them. I start showing him all the clothes and he's like, oh, hey, if I needed like 5,000 of these, how much would you sell it for? $35. I don't know. I just throw something out, right? Next morning, I wake up with a bunch of text messages. Hey man, I had to take an overnight flight to New York. I left a hoodie out on my porch though. Here's my address. Come by, pick it up. I need 5,000 of them. And so I get in my car, drive to Sun Valley, pick up this hoodie, take it home, start, looking at everything. I realize who it is. I'm just a little mind blown at the point. And that's really what ended up starting Limitless. So I was living at the time with a roommate named Steven Mangini. He also had his own brand. He's from Rochester, upstate New York, kind of middle of nowhere area for New York sense of stuff, small town sort of deal. And he had his own brand, Disaster World. And he actually moved out back when I first moved out, when COVID started. My roommates originally were photographers. They had to move away from California and back to Iowa because the lockdown happened. They were doing a lot of wedding and event photography and all of that stuff got canceled, right? So back then I was scrambling. I could barely afford my one room at the time, let alone 2 rooms now. And so I found Steve on Instagram in a fashion group chat that we were in, convinced him to take a one-way flight out here. And while he was out here, I secured an internship. I went to that internship the next day. They said, hey, do you have anybody else like you that could come join us as well? I said, yes, I do. I told Steve that day. Steve came with me the following day. Long story short, that internship, they promised us a 6-figure salary. They promised us benefits, all that stuff. All we had to do was put in 3 months of hard work. Put in those 3 months of hard work. We showed up on the day that we're supposed to get this contract. All the locks have been changed. No more cars in the driveway. Nobody's answering our phone calls and texts. We got the real LA experience, right? It sucked. It was one of the worst. At that time, it might have been one of the worst things that's happened to me, but also through challenges like that, it's allowed me to get to where I am today. And I know how to properly treat people. So when I put somebody into that position, I know how to properly handle it and how to actually see it through and get them across the finish line and make their experience not like mine. So a week after that, we get an eviction letter on our door because the person we were subleasing it from never was sending rent. So Steve and I had to scramble together a few $1,000 in about 2 weeks and go move into this East Hollywood place and just thug it out for a little bit, I guess. But those challenges, those hardships suck. In the moment, it feels like you want to give up. This is my dream. We just got such a big taste through doing that internship, right, that we were doing. It was in a crazy house in the hills. There were McLarens, Ferraris, Rolls Royces, right now, just like, that's what I want, but I want to be a good guy about it. So I was down to hustle it out in the car, get a U-Haul and live out of it, throw all of our stuff in the back of the U-Haul and live out of the U-Haul for what. Thankfully, we never had to get there. Thankfully, we were able to secure this little spot. Fast forward a few years to around kind of present time, right? And it's lots have changed, but lots is also the same, right? I'm in the fashion industry more than I could have ever really imagined. I'm working with some of the top major performing artists in the hip hop and in the country western scene right now. I'm doing stuff that I could only have really dreamt about when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, really trying to bootstrap Human, my own brand at that time. And to get to where I'm at today, it's remarkable and it's been a journey, and I know I've only just really started. Limitless, the manufacturing company, it's still fairly new. We've been around for about 3 years now, but I like to say that this is really just our first year, right? It took a year for us to understand what we were doing. It took a year for us to actually be able to build out a system to what we were doing. Now that we have the system, we know what we're doing. Now it's okay. Let's actually do this thing, right? And so it's been a wild challenge. Limitless has really been an embodiment of kind of everything that Steve and I have done for our own personal brands. And we've kind of brought it all underneath one roof to just be able to provide it to clientele that we're willing and able to work with and that are willing and able to work with us. So we do everything from graphic design to web design, the manufacturing of the product, the tech packing of the product, the pattern development, the warehousing, the cutting, the sewing, the printing, all the decorations, all the embroidery work, right? A to Z. We covered all: customer service, product photography, the whole nine. So we really try to position ourselves in a spot where we can work with a major performing artist that says, hey, you make music incredibly well, you tour incredibly well, and that's your bread and butter. We understand you want to make a brand that lives past your name. We understand that you need alternative forms of income, because one day the music stuff might dry up and you don't want to be like the Rolling Stones, be 80 years old and having to go do a world tour to get paid, right? Or maybe they do. Maybe they just have an insane love for it and they want to do that. All power to it. We're here to help regardless, right? And so we allow them to be as hands-on or hands-off with their approach as they want to be. If they just want to say, hey, here are my ideas, take it into your own hands, great. Okay, all I need from you is jump on a call with me every 2 weeks. Every month we'll go over your sales and all the releases and next month's release, and perfect. Or there's, we have other clients that they bring in their own graphic designers. They bring in their own web team. They get very hands-on. They need approvals through every single step of the way, right? And we just kind of cater to the artist or the company that we're working with. And just, we get in where we can fit in, and we only want to provide solutions to things that we can actually solve for them. I'm very thankful and grateful to be in the position that I'm in, to have overcome many of the challenges that I've overcome, and to continue to conquer more challenges. Because at the end of the day, as entrepreneurs and as creatives and stuff like that, it's challenging. And the only way that you get better at it is by doing these things and overcoming these challenges and being able to position yourself in a way that you can brace the next challenge and jump that hurdle, right? And so you can find infinite excuses of why this won't work, or why you should quit, or what struggles you're having right now and why you can't get through it. And oh shoot, man, I should give up on this, right? I should just go be like everybody else. But in the creative entrepreneur world, you can only fail if you quit. If you don't quit, you're still trying, right? You're still a startup. You're still new. You're still figuring it out, right? You only fail if you quit and if you stop. So don't stop. Don't fail, right? Just keep going one day at a time. If you had a tough day, so did so many other people. Hopefully we can wake up tomorrow and have a little bit of a better day. And if you keep going, you're not failing.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Until next time, we encourage you to continue nurturing your process. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production that was workshopped as a part of the 2023 Google News Initiative Pre-Launch Lab. This episode was edited by Trinity Jackson. Our executive producer and host is Casey Willis, and our production coordinator is Liz Moore. The original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis, and our cover art was designed by Aaliyah Johnson. Special thanks to our guests. To find out more about them, you can visit our newsletter at couldbeprettycoolnews.substack.com. Thank you for listening.